My parents terminated my employment to lower expenses, and now their organization is disintegrating while I head the competition acquiring them at a bargain. I am Ethan Clark. I'm 38 years old, and after 15 years of constructing my family's venture from the ground up, my parents dismissed me because I was too expensive. I recall the ambience in the conference area feeling thick and oppressive, with an unspoken strain that sent a shiver down your spine. My father, James, occupied the head of the grand oak table, his face displaying a detached, business-like attitude. I knew it signaled trouble. My mother, Linda, sat to his right, her eyes fixed on a tiny blemish on the table's surface to avoid my gaze. My younger brother, John, across from me, wore a smug and spiteful smirk. He made no effort to hide it. Clark Properties had been my entire existence for the past 15 years. I had personally crafted the complete digital framework, from the tenant registration portals across our 50 properties in 3 states to the detailed maintenance request system and the safeguarded payment processing network handling millions monthly. It all stemmed from my vision and hands. I designed it to be the quiet, dependable cornerstone of our family's triumph. My father cleared his throat with a harsh, raspy sound. "Ethan," he said, his voice carrying a chilly formality he rarely used with me, even playfully. "We've been reviewing the company's accounts with a consulting team." He pushed a glossy bound report across the polished table. The cover read Operational Streamlining Assessment. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. For weeks, these cost cutters, as I'd nicknamed them in my head, had been roaming the halls, asking superficial questions and nodding knowingly as if they understood the answers. "It's simply a matter of overhead," my mother added, her voice faint and shaky as she continued staring at the scratch on the table. "Your wage, it's a significant figure, Ethan, a very significant one." Then John leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, his grin widening into a full smile. "We can bring on 3 junior programmers for what we pay you, Ethan," he continued, his tone brimming with a satisfaction he'd clearly been waiting years to express. "No hard feelings, it's just trimming fat, smart business, no hard feelings." The words hung in the stifling room, sucking out the remaining air. 15 years of 2am system restarts, missed social plans, and vacation days spent on the phone fixing a setup only I mastered. I'd built them an empire on a solid digital foundation, and they were treating me like a broken gadget to replace. I didn't argue, I didn't raise my voice. What was the use? I just looked at my father and then my mother. I caught a fleeting glimpse of guilt in my mother's eyes before she masked it. My father's expression stayed blank. The decision was already made. I stood, slid my chair back quietly, and nodded once. "I understand," I replied, and the lie tasted like soot in my mouth. As I headed to my office, which I'd occupied for nearly a decade, I passed the main server room. Through the reinforced glass, the soothing blinking green lights of the system I'd devised were visible. On one screen, a simple line of text appeared in the system's diagnostic log. "The data backup routine is scheduled to run in 60 days, a regular task I'd set up. A task requiring my supervision." They had no clue about the ticking problem. I stepped into my office and grabbed an empty box. Packing up 15 years of your life is an odd chore. It doesn't take as long as you'd expect. A few framed pictures of friends, a mug reading decent coder of the world, and a stack of technical books I'd nearly memorized. All the while, a reel of memories played in my mind, not the good ones, but the minor ones. The countless small moments of being overlooked that I'd intentionally ignored for years. I wasn't just their son. I was essentially their first hire. I remembered the true beginning, working from the damp, musty basement of their first small office building. While they were out hustling, making deals and networking, I was down there, surrounded by brick walls, powered by lukewarm coffee, and a near childlike faith in what we were building together. I taught myself to code because we couldn't afford a pro, not because I loved it at first. I pieced together our first server from scavenged parts and strung network cables across the ceiling with a stapler. The system grew naturally as the company expanded. One property grew to 5, then 20, and finally 50 across Ohio, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. With each acquisition, the system I created became more complex and essential. It was more than a convenience. It was the company's vital nerve center. It processed rent payments with ruthless efficiency. It dispatched maintenance teams using a formula I designed to reduce travel time while boosting tenant satisfaction, helping us maintain the highest occupancy rates in the region. It was our greatest competitive edge, and I was the architect. The challenge was I was the only one who truly understood it. That wasn't by design, it was due to budget limits. For at least the last 5 years, I'd been nearly begging them to invest in a proper tech department. I'd walk into my father's spacious office, armed with detailed plans and charts showing the rapid growth of data and user requests. "Dad, we need at least 2 support techs," I'd say, pointing to a graph showing our server load nearing critical levels. "And we must start documenting the system design. If I get hit by a bus tomorrow, you'll be lost." My father would lean back in his plush leather chair, which I knew my system had paid for many times over, and give me that patronizing, reassuring smile. "Son, cash is tight right now. Every extra dollar has to go toward grabbing that new property set in Pittsburgh. Besides," he'd add with a hearty pat on my shoulder, "you handle it all so well alone. Why pay for more hands when we have the best right here?" My mother's approach was gentler but equally dismissive. "Oh, Ethan, you always fret too much," she'd say, waving her hand like shooing a fly. "It's all just circuits and wires. As long as the rent checks keep coming, it's working. Don't overthink it." I recall one Thanksgiving clearly. I was set to attend my then-girlfriend's family dinner, a big step for us. My phone exploded at 2 p.m. just as they were pulling the turkey from the oven. A power surge at one of our main data centers corrupted a key database. I spent the next 6 hours on calls and logged in remotely, carefully rebuilding the index from a backup. I saved the company from a potential week-long outage. When I called my father late that night to say the crisis was averted, he simply replied, "Good work, son, knew you could do it." Then he raved about the amazing turkey John had carved. He never asked what I'd missed. My girlfriend and I broke up a week later. David, our maintenance chief, seemed the only one in the whole outfit who got it. David was a lifer with rough hands and motor oil under his nails. He'd watched me grow from a little kid in the basement to the guy running the digital show. After another grueling budget meeting, he found me in the server room, staring at the blinking lights. "Don't let it get to you, Ethan," he said with a low grunt. "This whole place, this entire 50-property operation runs on what's in your head. They don't have a clue. They think it's the buildings that make the money. It's not. It's this." He tapped the glass of a server rack with his thick finger. "It's you." His words offered some solace, but the frustration grew, especially after John officially joined the team. He'd finished a business degree, and my parents quickly appointed him vice president of operations. He got a corner office, a fat expense account, and zero understanding of how the business actually worked. I remember him strolling into my office one day, seeing my whiteboards covered in complex diagrams and remarking, "So you just make the computers run? Seems pretty simple." He saw me as the nerdy older brother, the guy in the back room serving a necessary but pricey purpose. He resented my salary because he couldn't measure my work on one of his basic spreadsheets. I was seen as a problem to fix rather than an asset to value. Then came the consultants. They were introduced by Mr. Paul, an old family friend who golfed with my dad on Saturdays. "James, you've got to meet these guys," Paul had said at a 4th of July barbecue, his voice booming with mock seriousness. "They're absolute geniuses. They'll find savings in your operation you never dreamed of." The experts from Cost Trimmers, Inc. were 2 slick men in suits probably worth more than my first car. They spoke only in buzzwords. Teamwork, improvement, downsizing, and value-driven cuts. To reduce costs, they created colorful charts and polished PowerPoint slides that said the same thing in 100 different ways. What's the biggest, easiest, and most valuable cost to eliminate? They highlighted with a flourish the highly paid head of engineering who, in their expert view, could be readily replaced by a team of cheaper, younger, and more adaptable people. They presented their findings to my parents in the main conference room. I was invited but not asked to speak. I basically had to sit there and listen as these 2 phonies, who likely couldn't tell a server from a toaster, explained how my 15 years of specialized knowledge was a liability. "You're paying for outdated expertise," one of them said calmly, glancing at my father. "In today's fast-paced tech world, you want eager, flexible juniors. You can get 3 for this one salary. Think of the instant return." My parents, already under financial strain from a disastrous real estate investment they'd carefully hidden from me, saw the consultant's idea as a miracle fix. It wasn't just about my pay. It was about finding a simple, validating answer to a complex mess they were too proud to admit they'd caused. Firing me was easier than confessing they'd gambled and lost millions. Looking back, all the signs were there. Mr. Paul would ask me very specific questions about our system security protocols at family gatherings. My parents would awkwardly change the subject whenever I mentioned long-term planning. They weren't just being stingy. They were desperate. What about John? John was just relieved to be the unchallenged prince with the court wizard out of the way. I secured the cardboard box with a long, noisy strip of packing tape. As I carried it out of my office for the last time, I saw David in the hallway. He just looked at me, his eyes filled with a sad, weary understanding. He shook his head slowly. "They've just made the biggest mistake of their lives, son," he said softly. At the time, I thought he was just being a loyal friend. I had no idea how prophetic his words would prove to be. I stepped outside into the bright afternoon sun, leaving the blinking green lights and my entire family behind. I felt a deep sense of loss, but something else was brewing beneath it. A cold, unyielding determination. They had made a business decision. Now it was time for me to make mine. That night, after placing the box from my old life in the corner of my quiet apartment, I opened my laptop. An unread email sat in my inbox. The subject line was straightforward, direct, and professional. Interview request for Chief Systems Planner. The sender was Ridgeview Management, our largest, sharpest, and most successful competitor. The first 2 months after leaving Clark Properties were a strange, surreal period of silence. For the first time in 15 years, my phone wasn't a constant bomb of emergency calls, causing ongoing low-level anxiety. I could eat without worrying about a database error. I slept through the night every night. I went through 3 rounds of intense, fulfilling interviews with Ridgeview Management. Their CEO, Elena Cross, a sharp, no-nonsense woman, didn't just ask about my qualifications. She grilled me on my system design philosophy, scalability, and how to build resilient, future-ready platforms. It was a conversation I'd wanted to have with my own father for years, one about creating rather than just maintaining. Then, exactly 59 days after being fired, David called me. It wasn't on my old work phone, of course, but on my personal cell, which only a few people had. "Ethan, it's David," he said, his voice tense with a tightness I recognized all too well. "It sounds like something's broken. We've got a problem, a big one." "What's going on, David?" I asked, my heart starting to beat with a familiar, unwanted rhythm. "The system's acting up badly. Maintenance requests are vanishing into nowhere. It's not just a glitch. It's like they were never logged. John's new hotshot tech kid, Chad, keeps telling everyone it's a minor caching issue." Chad. I knew him from a quick, awkward introduction before I left, young and cocky, with a resume full of trendy buzzwords and a smirk that was a cheap copy of John. "It's Mrs. Gable in 12B, Ethan," David said, his voice lowering. "She's 80 years old, lives alone. Her ceiling's about to cave from a pipe leak. She's been calling for 3 days. Chad just keeps telling her to submit a ticket online, but the portal's down. She's been ringing my personal line. Crying, I don't know what to do." The image of this poor elderly woman scared in her own home chilled my blood. This wasn't about servers or coding anymore. This was about people. "It's not a caching issue, is it, David?" I asked gently. There was a long pause. "No, son, it's not. Feels different. Feels like the whole thing is starting to decay from the inside out." I knew what it was. Tomorrow marked day 60 of the data preservation routine. I had built a powerful script to run quarterly, a maintenance step for transferring old inactive records to a deep storage server. This saved space and kept the active database lean and fast. But it was not, and never intended to be, a fully automated process. It required manual oversight to distinguish between truly ancient data, like a tenant who moved out 3 years ago, and recently active data that hadn't been updated in a few weeks. It was a safety net, a human check in the system to prevent exactly what was about to happen. Without my supervision, the script would run blindly. It would flag a 3-month-old lease agreement as inactive and archive it, rendering it inaccessible to the front-end systems. It would look for a recent payment record and do the same. It wouldn't just be a glitch. It would be a systematic and cascading data disaster. I explained it to David as clearly as I could. He let out a long, heartfelt curse under his breath. "I'll try to tell them," he said, but we both knew it was pointless. John wouldn't listen to an old maintenance guy over his new IT whiz. The next day, the storm hit full force. My phone started ringing around 9 a.m. The first call came from John. His voice was filled with irritation, not alarm. "Hey, Ethan, that maintenance thing is a bit worse than we thought. Chad's having some trouble tracking it down. What's the admin password for the root database?" It was a fundamentally reckless question, like asking for the keys to a nuclear launch site. Giving him the password would be corporate suicide. I'm not an employee anymore, John, I explained calmly, my voice steady. I can't give you that information. It would be a massive security breach. Don't be like that. We're family. Just help us out. You define the terms of our relationship, John. It's business, and I'm no longer in business with you, I responded. Then I hung up. An hour later, my mother called. Her voice was laced with strained sweetness. Ethan, honey, your brother is really struggling. He's so stressed. Can't you just come in for a little while just to point him in the right direction? Mom, I don't work there anymore. It wouldn't be appropriate. Don't be so difficult, Ethan. This is your family's legacy on the line. You were the one who said it was just business, Mom, I answered, my tone harsher than intended. I cut the call before she could respond. By mid-afternoon, true panic had set in. My father called, his voice full of rage and terror. Ethan, the payment processing system is completely down. It's rejecting all incoming rent payments. It's the first of the month. We have millions in receivables that have just disappeared. Do you know what kind of penalties we face from the banks? I have an idea, I explained. The archiving mechanism probably marked active tenant payment profiles as inactive and locked them down one by one. You have to fix this, he exclaimed, his voice breaking with despair. This is a disaster of your making. My making, I said, a chilling calm coming over me. I seem to recall proposing a budget for a support team and a documentation project for 5 years running. Who was it that called that unnecessary overhead? I'll pay you $200 an hour, whatever you want. Just come down here. This was the moment I had both dreaded and in a dark, bitter corner of my heart expected. My thoughts returned to the cold conference room, John's sneer, my mother's averted gaze, and my father's cold rejection. Years of being undervalued, my warnings being systematically ignored, a lifetime of it. Then my mind did something unexpected. It took me back to a sunny afternoon when I was 10 and John was 6. He had fallen off his bike and scraped his knee, blood mixed with dirt. He was screaming, and I was the one who picked him up, dusted him off, and carried him halfway home on my back. A pang of familial duty and a shadow of brotherly fondness twisted in my stomach. For a brief second, I almost gave in. Then my phone vibrated with a new email notice. I took a quick look at my laptop screen. The sender was a leaner cross. The subject line read, formal offer, Chief SYSDMS Planner, RIDGEVIEW Management. My memory of my crying young brother faded, replaced by a crystal-clear image of John's smug expression in that boardroom. The internal conflict was resolved, my determination solidified into something as strong and unyielding as forged steel. Dad, I whispered into the phone, my voice steady and clear like a bell. You have made a business decision, I've also made one. Before he could react, I hung up. I opened the email from Ridgeview. My income was 30% higher than what my father had been paying me. It featured a large signing bonus and stock options in a growing company, but it was more than just money. It was the title. It was all about respect. It was an opportunity to create something amazing without having to beg for the necessary tools. The phone rang again. It was John, his voice wild and hysterical. It's $500 per hour, Ethan. $500, just name your price. We'll give you a stake in the company, please. I let it go to voicemail. I typed a one-word response to a leaner cross, accepted. Then I shut off the phone. For the first time in my adult life, quiet seemed peaceful. Starting with Ridgeview management felt like walking out of a black and white film and into vibrant Technicolor. The workspaces were sleek and modern, designed for collaboration with floor-to-ceiling windows and a calm, focused energy. On my first day, a leaner cross personally walked me to my new workspace. It was a corner office with a stunning view of the downtown skyline. This is your space, Ethan, she stated, her tone direct and respectful. Your team consists of 4 senior engineers, all top-notch. The welcome packet includes your first-year budget. We hired you because you're among the best. We trust you to build the industry's most robust, scalable, and secure property management platform. My door is always open. Don't hesitate to ask for what you need. This is what I need. The words were simple, but they felt revolutionary. For 15 years, my professional life was defined by what I couldn't have. Here, I was asked what I needed to succeed. It was disorienting in the best way. My new crew was fantastic. They were dedicated professionals genuinely eager to work with me. When I presented my early architectural sketches on a huge whiteboard, they saw potential rather than obstacles. They asked sharp, insightful questions. They challenged my assumptions constructively. We spent the entire afternoon debating the merits of two different database technologies. We were collaborating to create something greater together. It was everything I'd ever dreamed of in a professional setting. Linda, one of my engineers, found a way to optimize a search query I had designed, shaving response time by half a second. Instead of being defensive, I was thrilled. "That's brilliant," I told her. "Put it in." The unexpected appreciation on her face told me everything I needed to know about the culture Alina had built here. Meanwhile, the storm at Clark Properties intensified into a Category 5 hurricane. David kept me updated via sporadic discreet text messages and brief dispatches from a war zone. They attempted to restore from a server backup. One text read, it was 1 week old. They deleted the last 7 days of maintenance logs and payment data. Chad blames a corrupted server issue. John hired 2 additional junior staff from an online freelance site. Another stated a week later, they're based in 2 different countries. It's like watching 3 kids try to solve a Rubik's Cube by pounding it with a hammer during a terrible video call. The chaos wasn't just internal anymore. The tenants were furious. Negative reviews were popping up on Google and Yelp like poisonous mushrooms. Occupancy rates, once my family's proudest metric, were beginning to slip. About a month into my new job, Alina summoned me to her office. It was the same office where she'd hired me, but the atmosphere was different. I was no longer a candidate. I was a member of her inner circle. "Ethan," she began, motioning for me to sit down. "You've been here for a few weeks. You're getting the lay of the land. I've got a mission for you that requires your unique and intimate insight." She pushed a file across her large desk. "I'd like a thorough competitor analysis of the top companies in our region. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. I'm particularly interested in your expert and unbiased assessment of Clark Properties' current operational flaws from a purely technical perspective." My heart skipped a beat. This wasn't a casual request. This was a strategic move. A corporate chess move. I spent the next week working late into the night, not out of obligation, but out of a deep sense of professional pride. I was objective. I didn't write anything about family betrayal or hurt feelings. I prepared a cold, rigorous technical analysis of a company in a downward spiral. I described the IT system's custom, undocumented, and fragile nature. I identified the single point of failure, a complete reliance on one person's institutional expertise. I detailed the cascading effects of letting the data archiving routine run unchecked, including catastrophic data loss, major legal and compliance issues, and a total and permanent breakdown in tenant trust. My assessment was stark. Without a top-to-bottom system rebuilt by an expert team which would take months and cost millions, the company's core operational integrity was irreparably damaged. I didn't have to guess. I knew. I had built the house, so I knew where all the load-bearing walls were, and I knew they were going to collapse. I turned in the 20-page report to Alina. She read it in total silence with an unreadable expression. When she finished, she carefully set it on her desk and looked up at me. "This is devastatingly thorough," she said with a gleam in her eyes that I couldn't quite decipher. "Thank you, Ethan. This is exactly what I needed." A few days later, I received a final SMS from David. It was an image of a letter printed on thick letterhead from Vanguard Holdings, our former largest client. The text below was brief and to the point. "It's official. Vanguard recently ended their contract. That's 20% of our most profitable properties gone. This is a fatal blow, Ethan. The company is in a downward spiral with no escape hatches." I gazed at the image, then out the window of my new workspace to the bustling city below. I didn't feel joyful. I didn't feel sorry. I felt a strong sense of inevitability, as if I were witnessing the enforcement of a natural law. Actions have consequences. It wasn't personal anymore. It was only business. My old family firm was crumbling as I had predicted for years. David's call about Vanguard Holdings terminating their contract was the final tremor before the earthquake. I understood what the loss of their biggest client meant. It wasn't just a financial setback. It was a public vote of no confidence that echoed across the regional real estate industry. Clark Properties was no longer struggling. It was clearly sinking, and sharks began to circle. I spent the rest of the day in a strange, focused detachment. I led a design meeting with my Ridgeview team, sketching out the architecture for our new cutting-edge tenant portal. We were creating something clean, modern, documented, and sturdy. We were building it the right way. My present and past stood in sharp contrast. That evening, as I drove into my driveway, my headlights pierced the twilight and settled on a familiar figure slumped on my front steps. It was John. He looked like a ghost of his old self. His usually impeccable hair was a mess, his fine suit was crumpled and stained, and the typical sneer on his face had vanished, replaced by a raw, hollow-eyed desperation that was painful to see. I shut off the engine and stepped out of my car, my keys jingling in the unexpected silence. I approached cautiously. He stood up as I neared, hands deep in his pockets and shoulders hunched in defeat. "Ethan," he said, his voice scratchy and broken. We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about, John," I said flatly, devoid of emotion. I kept my hand on the car door. "Please," he pleaded, and the words sounded like they came from a wounded animal. "Just hear me out. Vanguard is gone. The bank is calling our loans. We're going to lose everything. The company is going to go under." "I see," I replied. "No, you don't see," he shot back, a flash of his old arrogance returning before being quickly smothered by a wave of misery. "It's a complete disaster. The system, it's a black box. Chad and his guys quit this morning. They took their final paychecks and just walked out. They said the whole system was unethically complex and unsalvageable. They said only a ghost could have built it." "I'm not a ghost, John. I'm the guy you told to pack his things because I was too expensive." The words lingered in the chilly night air between us. He flinched, as if I had physically struck him. For the first time in my life, I saw genuine shame in my brother's eyes. "I know, okay? I know, I was an idiot. I was always jealous of you. I hated that Dad leaned on you for the critical stuff. I was a stupid, arrogant fool. Dad and Mom, they were stupid too." The cool night air bit at my skin as I stood there, staring at John, his plea hanging between us like a fragile thread. It was 02:20 a.m. PDT, Sunday, August 24, 2025. In the U.S., the world wrapped in a deep, quiet darkness. John's eyes, red-rimmed and hollow, searched mine for any hint of mercy, but my resolve remained unshaken. "Ethan, please," he whispered again, his voice cracking. "We're out of options. The bank's giving us 48 hours to settle the loans or they'll seize everything. Mom and Dad, they're breaking down. I don't know how to fix this." For a moment, I felt the weight of our shared past pressing down, the scraped knees, the late-night coding sessions in that damp basement, the unspoken bond of brotherhood that had once held meaning. But then the memory of the meeting room surged back. The cold dismissal, the years of my warnings ignored, the sting of being cast aside. The flicker of duty faded away. "I told you, John," I said, my voice steady but edged with finality. "You made your choice, I've made mine. This isn't personal anymore, it's business." He staggered back as if my words had physically shoved him. "Business. This is our family, Ethan. You can't just walk away." I turned toward my front door, the keys jingling softly in my hand. "I didn't walk away, you pushed me out. Good night, John." Before he could respond, I stepped inside and closed the door, the lock clicking shut with a decisive snap. Through the peephole, I watched him slump back onto the steps, head buried in his hands, a broken silhouette against the faint glow of the streetlight. A part of me ached to open the door, to throw him a lifeline, but the part shaped by 15 years of building and being discarded held firm. The next morning, I arrived at Ridgeview Holdings as the sun crept over the horizon, casting long shadows across the office. It was 07:30 a.m. PDT, and the building hummed with its usual early energy. Alina called me into her office shortly after I settled in. Her desk was strewn with papers, and a fresh cup of coffee sat steaming beside her laptop. "Ethan," she began, her tone brisk yet warm, "your competitor analysis was a game changer. Clark Properties is on the edge and the board sees an opening. We're moving to acquire their assets at a steal. I need you to lead the tech integration team. This could double our portfolio overnight." My stomach tightened. Acquiring Clark Properties wasn't just a corporate move, it was deeply personal. "You're certain about this?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "Absolutely," she replied, sliding a contract across the desk. "Their systems are a disaster, but with your know-how, we can salvage the data and streamline operations. The board's approved a lowball offer, $5 million for their 50 properties. They're desperate enough to accept." I nodded, glancing over the document. The numbers were staggering. Clark Properties had once been worth $50 million, and now it was being sold for a pittance. My work, my creation, had brought about its downfall, and now I'd be the one to rebuild it. "I'll take it," I said finally. "But I want full authority over the tech overhaul, no cutting corners." "Done," Alina said with a nod. "We start tomorrow." The acquisition unfolded with surgical precision. By Tuesday, August 26, 2025 at 10 o'clock a.m. PDT, Ridgeview's legal team had the signed agreements in hand. Clark Properties was officially ours. I led a small team into their old headquarters, now a hollow shell of deserted desks and flickering fluorescent lights. David was there, waiting by the server room, his weathered face a blend of relief and sorrow. "Ethan," he said, gripping my hand firmly, "I knew you'd end up here. They didn't listen, and now this is the result." I gave him a nod. "You're welcome to join us, David. We need someone who knows the boots-on-the-ground side." He paused, then broke into a grin. "Thought you'd never ask. Count me in." As we powered up the servers, the green lights blinked to life, my creation now under new ownership. The data recovery was a nightmare, just as I'd foreseen. Years of haphazard changes by Chad and his crew had turned the system into a chaotic web, but my team and I dove in with determination. By Thursday, August 28, 2025, at 03:00 p.m. PDT, we had 80% of the tenant data restored, and the payment system was operational again. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a call from an unfamiliar number. I answered, and my mother's voice came through, trembling but resolute. "Ethan, we signed the papers, it's finished, but can we talk?" As a family, I paused, the weight of her request settling over me. The business was settled, but the family divide remained. "I'll consider it," I said, and ended the call. That evening, as I sat in my new office overlooking the city, the clock reading 07:00 p.m. PDT, I reflected on the journey. Clark Properties was gone, its legacy folded into Ridgeview's expansion. John's desperation, my parents' regret, David's loyalty, it all churned in my mind. I hadn't sought vengeance, but the scales of justice had balanced themselves. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from John. "I'm sorry. Can we start fresh?" I stared at the screen, the city lights twinkling below. The choice was mine, reconciliation or closure. For now, I set the phone down, letting the silence speak. The next day, Friday, August 29, 2025, at 12 o'clock p.m. PDT, the coffee shop buzzed with an uneasy tension. My mom and dad sat on one side, their faces etched with regret tinged with lingering frustration. John stood a few feet away, fidgeting with his hands as if unsure of his place. I took a seat at the table and cut straight to the point. "I'm here to talk, but this isn't about business. This is about family." Mom lowered her gaze. "Ethan, we made a mistake, underestimating you. That was our biggest error." Dad nodded slowly. "We thought John could handle it, but he wasn't ready." Finally, John spoke, his voice low. "I know I was jealous of you. I'm sorry." The air felt cool, but a warmth stirred within me. "It'll take time to rebuild trust," I said, "but on one condition, no business talk, just family." They nodded, and for the first time, a flicker of hope ignited. As I left the coffee shop, my mind shifted to the technical challenges of the acquisition. On Saturday, August 30, 2025, at 09:00 a.m. PDT, we began a full audit of Clark Properties servers. After the data recovery, a major issue surfaced. A hidden malware, likely planted by Chad's team, was slowly corrupting tenant data. My team scrambled to develop an emergency patch within 24 hours, but it underscored the lingering vulnerabilities of the old system. I met with a leaner and said, "We need a complete system rewrite. This is just a bandage." She approved it without hesitation, though it promised to be a massive undertaking. That same evening at 06:00 p.m. PDT, a new threat emerged. An email arrived from Horizon Realty, a rising competitor gaining traction in the market. Their CEO, Mark Hensley, wrote, "Ridgeview's acquisition has disrupted the market balance. We challenge you to a tech showdown comparing our systems. The loser exits the market." It was a bold gauntlet, and a leaner turned to me. "Ethan, this is your arena. Are you ready?" I considered it, restarting with my family, tackling technical hurdles, and now facing a new rival. This journey was far from over. At 07:00 p.m. PDT, I called my team together and said, "Starting tomorrow, we prepare for Horizon. We're not losing."